Your grandparents did things every week that could get you questioned, fined, reported, or dragged into a legal mess today. Not because they were criminals, because the country changed. A boy riding in the back of a pickup truck. A father burning trash behind the shed. A neighbor selling milk from his own cow. A kid walking into school with a pocket knife because it was a tool, not a threat. A man building on his own land because the family needed it done before the rain came. Back then, none of this felt strange. It was ordinary life. Not always safe, not always perfect, but ordinary. Today, the same choices can bring permits, school discipline, health rules, child labor rules, code enforcement, or somebody from the county standing in your yard with a clipboard. So let's start with the simplest one. It almost sounds harmless, but stay with me because the deeper we go, this stops being about old habits and starts being about how much control ordinary families lost. There was a time when the back of a pickup truck was not treated like a forbidden place. It was where kids sat after church, where cousins rode to the swimming hole, where boys bounced on feed sacks while somebody's uncle drove slow down a gravel road. Was it safe? No. A pickup bed was never built to protect a child. But in rural America, people did it because that was the vehicle they had. One truck, one family, one way home. Most people did not see a legal problem. They saw a ride. They saw childhood. Today, especially when children are involved, that same ride can get a driver in trouble fast. Some states restrict minors from riding in open truck beds. In North Carolina, for example, children under 16 are generally not allowed in the open bed of a pickup truck unless an exception applies. Now imagine telling that to an old farmer in 1958. He would not hear transportation violation. He would hear, where else were they supposed to sit? That is the difference. Back then, the question was practical. Today, the question is legal. And yes, people got hurt. That is why the rules came. But this one still shows how far we moved. A child once learned to hold on. A driver learned not to show off. A family learned that freedom had consequences. Today, the same scene can become a ticket, a warning, or worse. And that is only the soft beginning. Because our grandparents did not just ride differently. They looked at the land differently too. Your grandfather might have walked into the woods and come back with something useful. Dead wood for the stove, a flat stone for the garden, a handful of berries, a plant his mother knew by name. To him, the woods were not decoration. They were supply. If something was useful, lying there, and nobody claimed it, old people often saw no reason to waste it. But today, where you are standing matters more than what you know. Private land with permission is one thing. Protected public land is another. In many national parks and protected areas, removing plants, rocks, natural objects, animal parts, or cultural material is prohibited unless a rule or permit allows it. So the old instinct of take only what you need can still get you in trouble if you take it from the wrong place. And that is where the old world and the modern world stop speaking the same language. Your grandmother might know exactly which plant helped a fever, but if she picked it in the wrong park, her knowledge would not matter. The boundary would. That is a hard thing for older people to understand, because to them the land was not just scenery, it was memory, it was use, it was survival. Modern life turned that relationship into signs, zones, permits, and penalties. Some of that protection was needed. People took too much. Places were damaged. But still, something changed. The old skill did not disappear because it was useless. It became risky because the world around it changed. And number 5 goes even deeper, because now we are not talking about wood or berries. We are talking about children. A lot of grandparents started working before modern kids are trusted to walk 3 blocks alone. Some milked cows before school. Some worked tobacco barns in the heat. Some split kindling because the stove did not care how old they were. That was the old family world. Children became useful early. A 10-year-old boy might know how to sharpen a blade. A 12-year-old girl might know how to run a house better than many adults today. A teenager on a farm was not decoration. He was labor. She was help. They were part of the household. Now, I am not talking about abuse. Some old children were worked too hard. Some lost childhoods they never got back. But in many families, work was not seen as exploitation. It was training. It was survival. It was how you learned to be needed. Modern labor law changed the line. Minors face restrictions on what work they can do, especially hazardous work. Agriculture has different rules, and family farms may have exceptions. But once money, machinery, employment, or non-family work enters the picture, the old way can turn into a legal problem. That is where the two worlds collide. Your great-grandfather saw a boy near a machine and thought, he is learning. Modern law may look at the same boy and say, he is too young to be there. And maybe both sides have a point. Old families sometimes expected too much from children. Modern families sometimes expect almost nothing. That is the uncomfortable part. Our grandparents did not ask, is this age appropriate? They asked, does this need doing? And in hard times, that question did not wait. Today, the wrong child doing the wrong task in the wrong setting is no longer just a family matter. It can become a government matter. And that brings us to number 4. If you grew up rural, you may remember this one before I even explain it. The smell alone brings people back. There used to be a burn barrel behind a lot of American homes. Not because people were trying to prove something, because trash service did not always come down that road, because the dump was far away, because a rural household had to handle its own mess. A steel barrel, a little smoke, a father standing there with a rake handle making sure the sparks stayed low. That was life. Today, burning household trash can get you in trouble in many places. Open burning is restricted by states and local governments, and household trash burning is often illegal or heavily limited because modern trash can release toxic smoke, and that part is real. Burning a paper feed sack in 1939 is not the same as burning plastic packaging, treated wood, synthetic fabric, and chemical-coated waste. Modern trash changed the smoke. But the burn barrel still tells us something important. The old household solved problems at the edge of the yard. The modern household rolls the problem to the curb and waits for the system. Trash leaves in a truck. Waste goes somewhere else. Disposal becomes a service. And if that service stops, many people have no idea what comes next. Your grandparents did. Maybe their way was dirty. Maybe their way was dangerous. But it came from a world where nobody else was coming. Today, that same instinct can bring a fine. And depending on what you burn, maybe it should. But look at the bigger picture. The family used to handle more. Now the family is allowed to handle less. That is the pattern, and once you see it, number 3 becomes a lot more than food. In older rural America, food did not always pass through a store. A neighbor had eggs, another had milk, somebody had beans, somebody had a hog ready. People traded, sold, shared, and settled up later. The food system was local because life was local. You knew whose cow gave the milk. You knew whose garden grew the tomatoes. You knew whose kitchen made the pie. And if something was wrong, you knew exactly whose porch to stand on. That kind of accountability is almost impossible to explain to modern people. Today, selling food can involve licenses, inspections, labels, refrigeration rules, cottage food laws, farmers market rules, and state health departments. Raw milk is the clearest example. Federal law requires pasteurization for milk and milk products in final package form when they enter interstate commerce. States have their own rules too. Some allow direct farm sales under conditions. Others restrict or ban them. So what your grandmother saw as neighborly food, modern law may see as unlicensed food distribution. That phrase tells you everything. Neighborly food became distribution. Now food safety matters. Bad milk can make people sick. Bad canning can kill. But when every bite must pass through a regulated channel, the small household loses power. The neighbor with extra food matters less. The family cow becomes less practical. The kitchen becomes less useful. And the store becomes the center of life. Your grandparents had a shorter food chain. Riskier sometimes, yes, but closer, more personal, harder to disrupt. Old families understood something we forgot. The person who feeds you has power over you. They wanted that power close to home. Today, if you try to rebuild that old system without knowing the rules, you can get into trouble fast. Now we move from food to land. Not public land, not somebody else's land, your own land. And even that may not be enough anymore. Your grandfather needed a shed. He built one. He needed a smokehouse. He built one. He needed a porch roof before the rain came in. He got lumber and started. That was the old rhythm. A man did not always call an office before fixing his own place. He looked at the problem, gathered what he had, and made the house work. Today, depending on where you live, building or altering structures can require permits, inspections, setbacks, zoning approval, and code compliance. Think about that. A family can own the land, own the tools, own the materials, and still need permission before improving the place. That is not a small change. Of course, building codes exist for reasons. Bad wiring burns houses down. Bad framing collapses. Bad plumbing makes people sick. But your grandfather did not grow up thinking of a shed as a regulated structure. He thought of it as shelter for tools. He thought of it as work that needed doing. And if he knew how to build it straight, dry, and strong, that was enough. Modern life trusts paperwork more than hands, inspection stickers more than memory, approved plans more than experience. Maybe that saved lives. Maybe it also made people helpless. Both can be true. Your grandparents could look at a sagging roof and understand the problem. Many people today look at the same roof and look for a phone number. That is not just a legal change. That is a human change. Build the wrong thing in the wrong place without the right permit and it can cost you. A stop work order, a fine, a forced removal, a fight with the county. Your grandfather might call that madness. The county might call it compliance. And that is the world we live in now. But number 1 may be the most emotional of all, because this was not just something grown men carried, it was something boys carried, and nobody thought it made them dangerous. There was a time when a pocket knife was not a scandal, it was not a threat, it was a tool. A boy had one in his pocket. A farmer had one in his overalls. A grandfather used his to cut twine, sharpen a pencil, open a feed sack, or peel an apple under a shade tree. A pocket knife was part of being useful. For many older Americans, that little knife meant something. It meant you were trusted. It meant somebody believed you had enough sense not to act like a fool. Today, carry that same object into the wrong place, a school, courthouse, airport, or government building, and you can be in serious trouble. Schools across the country often treat knives, including pocket knives, as prohibited weapons under discipline policies or state law. And this is where the old world feels almost impossible to explain. Your grandfather carried a knife because he was expected to be responsible. Modern institutions often assume responsibility cannot be trusted. That is a massive difference. Old America did not think every tool was a problem. It thought a person could be taught how to handle one. That teaching started early, not with speeches, with supervision, with a look from your father that said, "Don't be stupid." And for many families, that was enough. Not always, but often. Today, we often remove the tool because we do not trust the judgment. Maybe modern life has reasons, but I still think something was lost. Because when you take every tool away from a child, you do not automatically create safety. Sometimes you create adulthood without competence. Your grandparents knew tools could hurt you. That is why they taught respect. Modern life often teaches fear first. Respect and fear are not the same thing. That little pocket knife tells the whole story. Something once seen as proof that a child was growing up can now become proof that someone broke the rules. And that is why it belongs at number 1. So there they are, 7 things our grandparents did normally and often legally that could get you in trouble today. Riding in a pickup bed, taking from the woods, putting children to real work early, burning trash behind the house, selling food straight to a neighbor, building what the family needed, carrying a pocket knife like a tool. And yes, some of those rules exist for good reasons. The past was not perfect. Some people got hurt. Some children worked too hard. Some families breathed smoke they should not have breathed. Some buildings were not safe. But here is the question modern life does not like. Did we fix the danger, or did we just remove responsibility from ordinary people? Because those are not the same thing. Our grandparents lived with more burden, but also more control. They knew where food came from. They knew how to handle fire. They knew what a tool was for. They knew when a child was ready. They knew the land around them. Modern life moved much of that judgment into rules. Maybe some rules were needed, but the cost was real. People stopped knowing, stopped learning, stopped trusting their own hands. And once a family loses that, it becomes easier to manage, easier to sell to, easier to scare, easier to fine. That is the part that bothers me. Not safety. Safety matters. What bothers me is when safety becomes the excuse for making everyone dependent. Our grandparents were not backward. They were prepared. Not perfect, but not helpless. So now I want to ask you, which one of these did you see growing up? Did your family have a burn barrel? Did you ride in the back of a truck? Did you carry a pocket knife to school? Did your grandfather build without asking anybody? Tell me in the comments. I want proof that this knowledge was real. Proof that families once lived with more skill, more trust, and more responsibility than modern life wants to admit. And if this is the kind of conversation you have been looking for, subscribe to The Old Way Still Breathes, because here we remember what worked, admit what did not, and ask why so much ordinary wisdom disappeared. Until the next video, remember this: our grandparents were not backward, they were prepared. And maybe it is time we stop laughing at the old ways and start asking why people needed so many laws to replace them.